Good morning. Today is the 20th day of Tevet, the 1st of January. And we're going to be looking at the second reading of Parashat Shemot. And in this reading we meet Moses for the first time. We don't know his name yet, but he will have a name soon. And we read like this: When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he was like a son to her. She named him Moses, for she said, I drew him out of the water. Now this statement, I drew him out of the water, has many meanings. The way that it's understood many times is that Moses is free of cravings. And why is that? One of the most important statements that Jewish, let's call it, Jewish ethics and morality is based on is the notion that water is the source of all cravings, or water grows all manners of pleasure. And when we say water, we mean the water in the person himself also. In other words, in dry land, if we were all dry, if we were not 70% water. There's even a concept of blood boiling that we'll see in a few moments. If there wasn't this concept of liquid inside of us, we wouldn't have any cravings. And again, the image to have in mind is like a barren desert. That the barren desert doesn't grow anything. There's nothing there. In us ourselves, the water is considered to be the source of all the cravings that we have. And so it actually is a very important thing to have the right type of water inside. What's called the right type of water in Judaism? It's the same water that we saw at the beginning of creation. It says that the earth was chaotic and void, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. This notion of adding spirit over the waters is what actually calms the waters down. Later we saw this in Parshat Noach, when God made the waters calm down. So it says that God made a wind sweep over the waters. And by making it sweep over the waters calmed down. It was like before then the water was boiling, it was hot. It wasn't just water, it wasn't just rainfall. As we know, it says that the abyss also opened up, and the abyss is very hot. It's like a volcano, so it was like water at a boiling point. And so this again, not talking about just the physical aspect, rather the spiritual aspect, is that when you add the Spirit of God over the waters, that calms them down. So for instance, what that means is, it says in the Tanya, is that when a person is studying Torah, the words of God serve to calm down the boiling of the blood, the boiling of the water inside of us. And boiling here means that there's a craving for something, a strong craving. So by men, it's usually for physical things. It can be different forms of lust. It could be whatever. And by women, it's a lot of times search for possessions, for things that you can't do without it. So Moses being taken out of the water is like that he has, from his very constitution, the way he was created, he's void of water. He's not connected to these cravings. And that makes him into a very special person, obviously, who now has abilities that maybe most people don't, because most people are governed and are limited by the fact that they have these cravings, and they limit us in our spiritual pursuit. They limit us in our ability to devote ourselves and dedicate ourselves to good things. But Moses is not that way, and he's drawn out of the water. That's the concept. There's another meaning to this. The water is always likened to loving kindness. So we have loving kindness, which is connected to water, and fire, which is connected to might. And then we have air, which is beauty, tiferet, and earth is related to kingdom. Earth is always kingdom. Remember, we saw this actually yesterday with the land. So these are the four elements, the way that they correspond to the four basic sfirot, the four basic emanations. So when we say that Moses was taken out of the water, we're saying he was taken out of loving kindness, meaning his origin is in loving kindness. Here it's like a taking in the sense of that she took him from the waters. Usually the idea there is that when the child is in the womb, he's in the water, and then he comes out and becomes dry. And the sense of dryness means that he's connected to this world. This world is a world that is more dry. What it's explained in Kabbalah and Chassidus is that Moses is connected to his previous incarnation, which was in a state of loving kindness. It wasn't in a state, meaning his essence is loving kindness. And there's a lot of descriptions of this, and it's actually needed in order to become a true leader. A true leader has to be someone who's steeped in loving kindness and not in might. And even though he learns might slowly, he learns how to also act with might, but his continence, the way he begins, is with loving kindness. So let's look at something interesting about Moses. He's considered to be the archetypal soul of not just everything we just said, but mostly of what we call self-nullification, the ability to nullify himself before God. And that's what he says. We'll see later when we get to it in Exodus 15. He says about himself and Aaron, and we are nothing. The feeling that I am nothing, that everything I've ever done is God's doing, not mine, that is the archetypal soul that Moses is. And we find in the Arizal, and even actually before the Arizal, also before Rabbi Isaac Luria, we find many attempts to identify Moses in other people in the Bible and later in the time of the Talmud. And the first person that he's connected to, and he's connected to very strongly, is Adam himself. It even says that when it said that God put the image of himself, the image of God in Adam, what he put in Adam was Moses' soul, a certain aspect of Moses' soul. And we see this in the Bible because when God calls out to Moses at the beginning of the book of Leviticus, it says Vayikra, he called out, there's a small aleph at the end of Vayikra. It's a very small, it's not the usual size. And the way it's explained is because when God called out to Moses, he felt no pride in that. He didn't feel any kind of, that he was special or anything like that. He felt that the calling out to him was almost like you read it, Vayikir. It's almost like by chance. I once was talking to a very wealthy man who told me I was lucky. He told me about his wealth. It wasn't that he did, and I happen to know that he did do a lot in order to do it, but to get to where he was. But he considered it to be luck. It wasn't me. And Moses here also, he belittles himself so much. He says, God calling out to me, naming me by name, Vayikra el Moshe, he calls out to Moses, that's like a chance. It's not anything that has, it's no connection whatsoever to my actions, to who I am. God had to call someone. Okay, he chose me. That's how he sees it. On the other hand, the book of Chronicles begins with the word Adam. Adam, the first man. There it begins with, Adam begins with an aleph also. There the aleph is a major aleph. It's 4 times the size of a regular aleph. And the explanation there is that God also called out to Adam. And Adam took it as a sign of his worth. He took it as a sign of his, he turned it into pride, into self-pride. Look at me. God is talking to me directly. And that becomes a very important point between them, that Adam took the image of Moses in him, and he treated it as some kind of possession that he had, and something that he had acquired in some way. Whereas Moses took his humanity, even his, let's call it, in Hebrew you say his adamiyut, like the fact that he's an Adam, that he's a person, and he belittled it to the lowest possible place, that it really, for this I don't deserve anything at all. So that's the connection between the two of them. after Adam, Moses is reincarnated in Adam's. Well, when we say reincarnated, people think about something that has to die and then appear again, but really what we mean is that the trait can be in many people at the same time. And the next person is Abel, and Abel that was murdered by his brother Cain. And Abel was humble. Why did God? There's a lot of answers to why did God accept Abel's sacrifice, but He didn't accept Cain's. And the real reason, in the end, He says to him, is because you, Cain, you don't control your evil inclination. You haven't learned how to control it. But Abel, it's not about what you brought, it's how you brought it. When Cain brought the sacrifice, he had expectations. He said, since I've done such a great thing, in my accounting, I deserve such and such from God, the minimum being that He should be grateful to me. He should show His grace to me because I've gone out of my way to bring Him a sacrifice. But Abel, he's like his name. Hevel means like vapor, like nothing. He treats himself like, I have no worth of my own. And so what I've done by bringing a sacrifice, by bringing a gift as a word to God, is I've done what a human being is supposed to do. I haven't done anything special. I don't deserve anything special. And so the Medrash says that, how did they know that one sacrifice was accepted and the other wasn't? It was very simple. They both put it on the same altar, the altar that Adam had built the day that he was created, and he brought a sacrifice there, and they put it on the same altar, and they lit the two sacrifices together. And what happened was that Abel's sacrifice burnt, and the smoke went up, whereas Cain's sacrifice indeed burnt, but the smoke was heavy and fell down on the ground. And from that they knew whether or not they had been accepted. And this goes back to the same idea exactly that we started with, that in order to pacify the waters, in order to churn the waters inside ourselves into something that's godly, we have to add air that is light. Because you can have air that's heavy. Air that's heavy, that's burdened with hubris, is like air when a person speaks slander, like we talked about yesterday. When I feel that I'm special, that I'm different than other people, I have a better claim to this world, I have a better claim to life. So then the air that I speak is heavy. It's heavy, and therefore it falls down. It's weighted down, and it goes down to the ground. And that was the type of sacrifice that Cain had brought. He brought a sacrifice that was laden. It was it was like full of his feelings of self-importance. And therefore, the smoke that went up couldn't rise. On the other hand, Abel, who came with the feeling of being vapor himself, it's as if I'm nothing myself. Hevel literally means vapor, like smoke. Because he came with that, it rose up. And we can't get into all of it. If you want to see this, I suggest looking at the wonders this week. I hope it's up on the Patreon already. I'm not sure. I have to go take a look. It's not up. Okay, I'll bring it up. I guess somebody didn't do it. So read the whole thing. It's about this 11 different incarnations, or 11 different identities, people that we identify with Moses. And the most important story is the one about Zechariah ben Yehoiada. He was a high priest and also a prophet. It was a very long story. It took 200 years to fully complete. It's a very interesting story. But all these people, what they have in common is their ability to nullify themselves before God. And that is the intrinsic quality of Moses that passes from one incarnation to the next. Thanks for joining today. Hope to see you tomorrow.